Today's lesson is on the causes of the French Revolution. So we've talked about the idea of revolution, one government overthrowing another government, and this is going to take place in France in the late 1700s. So there are four main reasons the revolution occurred, and you'll see those at the top of the boards. So we'll go through them as you guys take notes. So the first one is that the population was divided into 3 states, and those were actually called the 3 estates. So the first estate was the clergy, and clergy are another fancy word for priests. So priests, they were a high clergy and they're also low clergy, and so this is going to be the high clergy. And these clergy are going to own 10% of the land in France. They're going to collect tithes from the people, and they're not going to pay taxes. Okay, that's important that you know they pay taxes. They do not pay taxes, and they also lived in very elaborate and very nice places. The second estate is called the nobility, and you'll remember this probably from a previous lesson. We talked about nobility. Another word is elite, basically people that have a lot of money. And these people hold high positions in either the courts, the church, or the government. And the interesting fact is that they owned 20 to 30% of the land, but they only made up 1.5% of the population. So it seems to be a little bit of a different, disparaging percentages. And finally is the third estate. And these are the commoners. It's basically everybody else. So this was 90% of the population. Actually, some estimate it was actually 98% of the population was in this third class. And these people, there's 3 groups within the third estate. It's peasants who are going to work the farms. It's going to be the lowest of the third estate. The bourgeoisie, which is a fancy French word for middle class. And finally, the sans-culottes. I probably pronounced that wrong. Sorry if you know French. That basically means without pants, because this group did not wear long pants, but they wore short pants. And these are going to be the urban workers that are going to work in factories and things like that. So interesting, yes, again, this was 90%, and this group was taxed. So keep that in mind when we talk about the French Revolution starting. The next cause is King Louis XIV. Okay, note the Roman numerals here. It looks very familiar to the absolute monarch Louis XIV, but it is Louis XVI. 10, 5, 1 equals 16. He was an absolute monarch, much like the 6 we studied in our previous lesson. He lacked strong decision-making skills. It's something you need in a leader, and he did not have those. He was strongly influenced by his wife, Marie Antoinette, and you'll see her name come up later on in our lessons. And he preferred personal interest over the court's interests. So he was essentially very into himself, with a little help from his wife. And think about how that could cause a revolution. Next is the introduction of revolutionary ideas. So as we talked about the absolute monarchs, monarchs were believed to have been put there by God, had divine right. Well, those ideas are really going to start to change in the late 1700s. And that's thanks a lot to the Age of Enlightenment. So the introduction of the Age of Enlightenment comes with the introduction of a lot of new ideas. One of them being a challenge to absolute rule. Saying there are other ways to rule, and maybe these people do not have divine right. It's going to encourage free commerce, so the government can't necessarily tell you where to send your business. And this is going to be an idea that the bourgeoisie, or we said the middle class, is going to like, because a lot of the problems they have, the Enlightenment is helping to solve them. Okay, and we'll learn more. We talked more about the Enlightenment earlier this week, so these ideas should be familiar to you. And next, the French supported the American Revolution. Okay, and if they're supporting the American Revolution, they're supporting these ideas, which are going to then, the people of France are going to think about these for themselves. There's freedom for all men, not just the rich like the nobles and the clergy, but all men. A republic is better than a monarchy. France is under a monarchy, but they're actually supporting a country that's going to kick out a monarchy. And they're encouraging arms against tyranny. So going to war with weapons against these monarchs in America. And that would be the British. And finally, financial difficulties. So there's two main financial difficulties in France at the time. Sorry, can't really see that part. Sorry for the glare. Okay. But the first one is large debt. Okay. Meaning France owes a lot of money. And this is mainly because two things. Over ambitious wars. So they want to expand their territory. They want to show their power. So they've gotten these big wars that were over ambitious they could not afford. And the second is there's lots of spending on the courts. So when we talked about Louis XIV, we talked about him having these elaborate parties for his courts, and that's going to continue. So they're spending on the courts and not really trying to stop that spending at all. And they need tax reform. So we talked about in the first board that the nobles and the clergy do not pay taxes. Okay? The peasants, the bourgeoisie, and the people without pants, the urban workers, had to pay all the taxes. This is going to be a problem because though this is 90% of the population, they probably only control about 10% of the money. Okay? So when you have the nobles and the clergy who hold 90% of the money not paying taxes, a lot of the burden comes on these people, and they're not going to be happy. So those are the causes of the French Revolution.